I'm Hannah Whitaker, 35 years old, and on a cold Portland Christmas morning, I watched my sister twirl a set of car keys like a teenager while a white BMW idled in the driveway under a red bow, the kind you only see in commercials. In my lap sat a plastic piggy bank with a $2 start to my future. Dad's grin belonged to Brooke. Mom's hands were clasped, as if a prayer had been answered. I'd driven 7 hours through mountain passes to be here rehearsing the words, senior structural engineer, as if they might finally change something. The tree lights flickered across a wall of family photos, where my sister's smile filled most of the frames. When Mom urged me to open it, thin bills slipped out like a quiet verdict, and the room seemed to tilt toward a truth I'd spent years trying not to name. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and if you've ever had to stand tall when someone tried to make you small tap, like, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this story. I was the kid who fixed wobbly chairs and took apart radios for fun, growing up in a modest ranch house where Dad preached self-reliance and Mom prized appearances at church potlucks. My world was graph paper library books and after-school shifts, while Brooks was travel teams' art camps and new gear when the season changed. In our house, kindness meant doing your part and not making a fuss. And I learned early that being capable could be a blessing that slowly turned into an excuse. If something needed doing, Hannah could handle it. Scholarships and 2 jobs got me through college, long nights, and careful planning moved me up at the firm in Seattle, and every milestone I reached seemed to disappear into the background noise of, "You'll always be fine." When I pulled into my parents' driveway this year, snow gathering along the curb, I thought maybe bringing gifts I'd saved for and news I'd earned would make the room feel even for once, or at least level. Instead, the new luxury car sat shining under the porch light, while my well-worn Toyota cooled beside it, and the contrast between those 2 hoods said more about our family's story than anyone at the table would ever admit out loud. Brooke drifted past with perfume and congratulations directed mostly at herself, promising to drive me anywhere if my little car struggled while Dad nodded as though he'd solved a problem that never touched me. I set the piggy bank on the glass table and heard the hollow sound ring through my chest. The photographs on the staircase landed in my periphery pageants and parties, ribbon cuttings and team pictures, and I felt an old thread tighten at the base of my throat. The one that pulled me towards silence when speaking might break the peace. I excused myself upstairs to the bathroom where the mirror offered a face that looked composed but felt crowded, as if the room wasn't big enough for both the woman I'd become and the girl who used to apologize for taking up space. Downstairs, laughter rolled on. Upstairs, the air thinned until I pressed my palms to cool marble and counted my breaths. A patient engineer measuring stress before steel bends. I had come home hoping for pride and found a price tag instead, and before the night was done, that quiet click in my chest was going to become a choice I couldn't take back. The bathroom mirror reflected calmness I didn't feel. My hands pressed against the countertop until the blood drained from my knuckles, waiting for tears that never came. Downstairs voices rose and fell like nothing had shifted, laughter spilling up the staircase, as if $2 and a plastic toy were equal to a luxury car parked under a bow. My chest felt tight, every breath shallow, but I couldn't let it show. I straightened, smoothed the front of my sweater, and unlocked the door. I passed the hallway photos again, frame after frame, where Brooke's face dominated every milestone. Soccer uniforms, art shows, family vacations. My own appearances blurred into the background half-smiles in corners where no one's eyes lingered. The weight of 35 years pressed against me in that narrow hall, heavier than any steel beam I'd ever calculated. I walked into my childhood bedroom, lay on the bed fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling until the patterns on the plaster swam like shadows. Sleep never came. The night dragged with Brooke's excited voice echoing from downstairs, describing plans for road trips and clients impressed by her new car. At 2:00 a.m., the silence between us grew unbearable. I sat up, swung my legs over the edge, and knew I couldn't stay. My suitcase still rested against the closet, half unpacked from my drive down. I filled it with the things that mattered most: my grandmother's stuffed bear, the college photo album, and the small wooden box holding the first blueprint I'd ever signed. The expensive gifts I had wrapped with care stayed where they were. They no longer belonged to me. In the kitchen, I paused. The house key felt cold against my palm, familiar metal worn smooth from years of use. I set it on the counter beside the coffee maker, where my mother would find it in the morning. It made a small sound final, in a way words never could be. I carried my suitcase to the car breath, puffing in clouds under the porch light. Snow had begun to fall, soft flakes gathering on the hood of my Toyota. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and didn't look back. The highway stretched empty ahead, street lamps glowing halos through the storm. The radio hummed with an old holiday song until I turned the dial to silence. My own voice slipped out, unsteady whispering words to the vacant passenger seat. Merry Christmas. The irony stung, but I kept driving. By dawn, Oregon lay behind me, the road bending south toward a future I couldn't yet picture. My phone lit up on the console. Mom's face filled the screen, not a message asking if I was safe or if I needed rest, only a reminder about paying the electric bill at the family cabin. I let it go unanswered. Later, Dad called and I ignored that too. Their pattern had become clear. One handled the money, the other the emotions, and together they left no room for me. The road blurred with memories I'd never asked to revisit. Brooke's lavish fifth birthday ponies in the yard, and a castle-shaped cake compared to my sheet cake and dollar store balloons the next year. My valedictorian speech given to empty family seats because a junior varsity soccer game had seemed more important. College years where I balanced work shifts with heavy course loads while Brooke flew across Europe on their dime to find herself. Each recollection lined up neatly proof of a story I had never wanted to believe but could no longer ignore. When the snow thickened, I pulled onto the shoulder hazard lights flashing. My forehead rested against the steering wheel as tears finally burned through. The windshield wipers scraped back and forth, struggling to clear the view. My phone buzzed again, but this time the caller wasn't family. It was Megan, my college roommate, who had seen these patterns up close. "Where are you?" Her voice came steady, warm, and real through the speaker. "Somewhere south of Eugene," I managed. "Come to San Francisco. Stay with me. Family doesn't treat family like this." The words cracked something open. For years, I'd carried the belief that help was one-directional, always mine to give, never to receive. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. You've spent your life carrying everyone else. Let someone carry you. Silence filled the car, heavier than the storm. Finally, I whispered, "Okay, text me where you are every hour. I'll make up the guest room." The call ended, and I eased back onto the highway. The decision felt fragile, but real like fresh clay before it hardens into form. Snow continued to fall, but the steering wheel no longer shook beneath my hands. By sunrise, I crossed the California border, the welcome sign gleaming through the mist. 17 missed calls and dozens of messages filled my screen. I turned off notifications and let the quiet settle. Hunger gnawed at me as the miles stretched on. A diner appeared by the roadside, its neon sign glowing like a beacon. Inside, warmth enveloped me, the air heavy with coffee and the crackle of bacon on the grill. An older waitress with silver-streaked hair poured coffee into a chipped mug without asking. "Rough night," she said, voice carrying decades of practiced kindness. "Rough life," I muttered, embarrassed by my own candor. She nodded unfazed. "Family or boyfriend?" "Family." She placed a hand briefly over mine. "Blood makes you related. Love and respect make you family. The special comes with extra bacon today." I ordered, wrapped both hands around the mug, and let her words echo against the glass where snowflakes melted into rivulets. After 35 years of being related, Maybe it was time to learn what family could mean when built on respect. That morning marked the first steps away from the only story I had ever known. San Francisco waited ahead with Megan's spare room and a promise of something different. I didn't yet understand how far this road would take me or how firmly it would redefine my worth, but I knew I couldn't turn back. And as I slid back behind the wheel, the piggy bank's hollow sound still ringing in my memory, I realized $2 had bought me a truth more valuable than anything left behind. Megan's spare bedroom became my landing place, a small square of terracotta walls and a view of the neighboring rooftops. She had cleared space in the closet, folded fresh sheets, and set a lamp on the nightstand that glowed warm against the January chill. I should have felt comfort in that kindness, but most nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening for footsteps that weren't there. The house was quiet, in a way that left my thoughts louder than ever. By the third week, the calls from my parents grew sharper. Dad's voice thundered through voicemail, demanding I return the car, as if the Toyota I had bought and paid for wasn't mine. Mom's messages shifted into guilt, telling me the stress I caused was sending her blood pressure up. I listened once or twice, then let the rest pile up like unanswered debts. The silence between us carried its own weight heavier than their words. One afternoon, I sat at Megan's kitchen table with my laptop open to an email draft I had rewritten a dozen times. My promotion in Seattle had taken years to earn, but the office now felt like a city too close to everything I had left behind. "Just send it," Megan urged from across the counter, her coffee mug steaming between her hands. With one click, I requested a transfer to the San Francisco branch. The answer came back in hours. Approved. I started work the following Monday, my new office tucked into a building near the Embarcadero. The rhythm of design meetings and site visits gave me something steady to hold on to, but the quiet at the end of each day followed me home. My apartment hunt began quickly. Megan's friend Andrea managed a complex in the Mission District, and by February I had signed a lease for a small one-bedroom with west-facing windows. The space was nearly empty when I moved in, just a futon, a desk, and the hum of a refrigerator, but it was mine, and that mattered. Therapy came next. Megan slid a business card across the counter one evening, the name Dr. Ruth Levine printed in clean type. I resisted at first, insisting I wasn't broken, but Megan only said, "You've been carrying this a long time. Maybe it's time to set it down." Dr. Levine's office smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. She didn't fill silence with chatter. She waited until I found words on my own. The first one that surfaced was favoritism, and it felt foreign to hear it spoken aloud. Weeks blurred into patterns. Work filled my days and evenings stretched long. I signed up for a pottery class at a community center after Megan insisted I needed something outside the office. The clay felt cold and stubborn under my hands, refusing to form until I let go of control. My first piece was lopsided edges, uneven, but when the instructor set it aside to dry, I couldn't stop staring. For the first time in weeks, I had created something just for myself. Still, nights remained difficult. The phone lit up with missed calls, sometimes 30 or more in a day. Rumors trickled through old colleagues that my parents were telling people I had suffered a breakdown. Brooke posted filtered photos online with captions about family heartbreak, painting herself as the concerned sister. I read them once, then deleted the app from my phone. At work, no one knew any of it. They saw my calculations, my designs, and the hours I poured into each project. That anonymity became a kind of refuge. One evening after group therapy in a church basement, I listened to a man named Raymond speak about his own family estrangement. "Love without respect isn't love," he said. "It's possession." The words landed heavily, and I carried them with me on the walk back through the fog. They fit into the spaces my parents had left empty, filling truths I hadn't known how to name. By spring, the futon gave way to a proper bed, and the windowsills lined with pottery that grew steadier in shape. The piggy bank I had once left behind in Portland now sat on my shelf, filled not with 2 single bills, but with crisp 2s collected each week. I wasn't saving them out of spite. They became a reminder, a marker of the weeks I had lived free from the weight of being measured as capable and little more. The first real confrontation came in March, when I answered a video call after weeks of silence. My parents' faces filled the screen, Dad's jaw tight, Mom's eyes brimming with tears. They asked where I was, why I had disappeared, and how I could abandon family. My chest tightened, but Dr. Levine's voice echoed in my memory. Your feelings are valid. Their reactions belong to them. I needed space, I said. From family, from responsibility, Dad demanded. From being invisible, I answered, surprised at my own steadiness. From being valued less than Brooke. From trying to earn what should have been given. Mom's tears fell then, but for the first time they didn't pull me back. I ended the call with my hands trembling, but when the screen went black, a strange lightness filled the room. The months ahead stretched uncertain, but clearer than before. The patterns of silence and guilt still circled me, but I was learning to step outside their orbit. Each week added another bill to the piggy bank, another reminder that I could set my own measure of worth. And as summer edged closer, the first invitation arrived in the mail, a family wedding that would pull me back to Portland. The envelope sat unopened on my counter for days, a reminder that the story with my family wasn't finished yet. The wedding invitation sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally opened it. My name was written in looping calligraphy, the kind used on thick ivory envelopes meant to impress. No +1, just me. The weight of it pressed harder than I expected, pulling me back toward a family I had left on a snowy night with nothing but a suitcase. At my next therapy appointment, I mentioned it almost casually, but Dr. Levine leaned forward. "And how does it make you feel?" she asked, voice even leaving space for the answer I wasn't ready to give. I traced the brass tacks on the chair's armrest one by one, terrified, I admitted, but also ready. The words surprised me as much as they did her. That weekend, I walked through a boutique in the Mission District, running my hands across rows of fabric. Midnight blue silk caught the light shimmering between navy and black. The seamstress pinned it carefully along my shoulders during the fitting, adjusting the hem so it skimmed without apology. It wasn't a dress for reconciliation. It was a dress for standing upright without bending. The calls from my parents continued. Dad left voicemails insisting I stay at their rental house with the rest of the family. Mom sent messages about how much easier it would be if I just came home for the week. I didn't reply. The boundary itself was the message. I booked a hotel room 4 blocks from the venue, a place that felt like neutral ground. Brooke's texts arrived daily in the weeks before the wedding. "We need sister time. Can't wait to see you." She had never reached out this much when we lived in the same city. I showed Dr. Levine the messages during one session. "What do you think she wants?" she asked. I laughed, but it came out hollow. A ride, money, the old version of me. At night, I spread the seating chart across my kitchen table, a copy Vanessa had accidentally included in a group email. My name was placed between my parents directly across from Brooke, a perfect family tableau. I picked up the phone and called Vanessa. "Do you mind if I request a small change?" I asked. My voice was steady, practiced. She agreed without hesitation. When the day of the rehearsal dinner arrived, San Francisco fog clung to the runway as my plane lifted. The clouds broke somewhere over Oregon, revealing the ridges and rivers of the state I once called home. My heart thudded as the plane descended into Portland. In my purse, the smooth pendant Megan had given me rested against my fingers. She had said strength isn't about not feeling fear. It's about moving forward while you feel it. The rehearsal dinner was held at a historic hall with tall wooden doors and stone steps that gleamed in the twilight. I paused, outside, smoothed the silk blouse beneath my jacket and walked in. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. My mother's hand rose to her throat. My father's eyes narrowed before he looked away. I kept my steps, measured heels, clicking against the floor, offering nods without rushing toward anyone. Brooke reached me first, her arms opening in a gesture of embrace. "You look amazing," she said, her voice too bright. Her watch was missing her hair grown out without its usual salon shine. I thanked her, stepping back quickly. "How's the BMW treating you?" I asked. Her smile, flickered eyes darting aside. "I traded it in for a Honda. More practical." Relatives circled throughout the evening, some cautious, some eager. Cousin Tara leaned close, her voice low. "Your parents are selling the house. They say medical bills, but everyone knows it's from covering Brooke for years." Uncle Simon shook my hand firmly, eyes lighting when I mentioned my promotion. "Senior project manager. That's wonderful." The recognition felt different, earned without competition. Later, my father cornered me near the bar, bourbon heavy on his breath. "Family sticks together," he said, his voice carrying the weight it once did. I met his gaze. "Do they, or do some get pushed aside?" His face reddened, words catching in his throat. "We've always supported you." I answered softly. $2 in a piggy bank. That was your definition of support." He walked away without responding. In the ladies' room, my mother appeared at the sink, her reflection blurred in the mirror beside mine. "We miss you so much," she whispered, reaching for my hand. I rinsed the soap from my fingers and dried them carefully. "I miss who I thought you were too," I said, placing the towel aside. On the terrace later, Brooke pulled me into the cool night air. The scent of roses drifted from the garden below. "The BMW was repossessed," she confessed quickly. "Clients dried up. Dad can't help anymore. I'm drowning Hannah. I don't know how to stand on my own." Her voice cracked, fear breaking through the edges. 7 months ago, I would have stepped in immediately, offering money, a place, a plan. This time, I placed a hand gently on her arm. "That sounds hard," I said quietly. "I can help you make a budget, but I can't fix this for you." Her eyes widened, as if hearing compassion without rescue for the first time. Inside, the music played, glasses clinked, and the family shifted uneasily in the space I had claimed. Tomorrow would bring the ceremony, the photographs, and the confrontation I knew was waiting. But standing on that terrace, the night air cool against my skin, I felt the ground firm beneath my feet. The morning of the wedding arrived, soft and golden sunlight spilling through the tall windows of the bridal suite. Vanessa stood before a mirror, her veil spread like a sheet of light, bridesmaids bustling around her with pins and brushes. I watched quietly from a corner chair, smoothing the skirt of my dress, the midnight blue silk holding its shape as if it belonged to me. Aunt Martha slipped close, her hand brushing my arm. "Your parents are waiting for you in the library," she whispered, her voice low and cautious. "They said it was important." My chest tightened, though my face stayed calm. I nodded, offering a small smile to Vanessa before slipping from the room. The hallway smelled faintly of polished wood and roses. When I reached the library door, its heavy frame seemed older than the building itself. I pressed against it, the hinges groaning as I stepped inside. My father paced near the fireplace, his movements clipped. My mother sat rigid in a high-backed chair, tissues balled in her hands. Brooke stood near the window, her dress shimmering in the morning light, her shoulders tight. "Hannah, thank God," Mom said, rising quickly. "We need to talk as a family." My father gestured toward a chair facing them, the setup too deliberate. "This can't wait." I closed the door but didn't sit. "I'm listening." Brooke was the first to speak, her voice rushing. "Dad lost his job months ago. The company downsized. Mom's been struggling with depression. They're selling the house." She stepped forward, eyes searching mine. "This all started when you left." The words fell heavy, meant to land as blame. I walked slowly to the indicated chair, set my purse beside it, and sat with my spine straight. "I'm sorry to hear about the job," I said evenly. "And Mom, I'm glad you're getting help." Their faces faltered, expecting a different response. "You don't understand," Dad snapped. "They're selling the house because of you." I opened my purse and drew out a leather-bound album. "No," I said, laying it across my lap. "They're selling it because of choices made long before I left. And I brought something to show you." The first page held 2 birthday photos side by side. Brooke's party, a princess theme with entertainers and a towering cake. Mine, a grocery store sheet cake at the kitchen table. "Remember these?" I asked, turning the pages slowly. Christmas mornings, graduations, vacations, each one told the same story. The pattern was no longer invisible. Dad's jaw tightened. "We always treated you girls equally." From my bag, I pulled a folder of bank statements. "These are my student loans. $67,000 I carried. Here Brooke's tuition fully covered plus a year in Europe. You had the money. You chose not to use it for me." Mom rose her hands, trembling. "Things were different then." "No," I cut in gently. I checked. Dad's promotion came before my freshman year. Grandma's inheritance, too. The money was there. I spread birthday cards across the table, Brooke's full of affection and praise, mine full of reminders to work hard. Finally, Dad's voice cracked. "We knew you'd be fine. You were always capable." I met his eyes. Being capable didn't mean I deserved less love. Responsibility didn't mean I had to carry everything. Mom's tears spilled for real this time, but I didn't stop. I reached once more into my purse and pulled out the plastic piggy bank. It landed on the table with a hollow sound. I opened the stopper and let the bills spill out crisp twos that drew every eye in the room. "I've saved one every week since Christmas," I said quietly. "This isn't about money, it's about what you thought I was worth." Brooke bent, picked one up, and turned it in her hand. Her voice was softer now. "I never saw it this way. They never taught me to stand on my own." Footsteps passed outside the door, voices rising as the ceremony drew near. I stood gathering the album and the folder, but leaving the bills scattered across the table. "I don't want apologies," I said. "I want change. I'll consider reconciliation under 2 conditions: family therapy and respect for my boundaries." Dad opened his mouth, ready to argue, but Mom placed her hand on his arm. "We'll do it," she whispered, "whatever it takes." I paused at the door, my hand resting on the knob. I need to take my seat. Monica is saving me a place. Then I stepped into the hall, my back straight, the weight in my chest lifting. Behind me, I heard Brooke whisper, "She's different now." The words carried after me like an echo proof of something already true. The ceremony began with the steady chords of a string quartet echoing through the vaulted hall. Rows of guests rose as Vanessa walked down the aisle, her veil trailing behind like mist across polished stone. I sat near the center, not between my parents as planned, but several rows away, Megan's empty seat beside me, holding the space she had promised to save. My hands rested calmly on my lap, though I felt the weight of eyes from the front row. When vows were exchanged and applause filled the air, I caught glimpses of my parents. My father clapped stiffly, my mother dabbed at her eyes. Brooke shifted in her seat with her gaze cast low. For the first time, I wasn't part of their display. I had chosen where to sit, and that small act of placement carried more weight than words. The reception unfolded under soft chandeliers, laughter rising with the clink of glasses. I made my way through the crowd, greeted by relatives who pulled me aside with hushed voices. Cousin Michael admitted he had always noticed the difference in how Brooke and I were treated. Aunt Martha hugged me tightly and whispered about the job my father had lost months ago. Each confession landed gently a reminder that I had not imagined what I had carried. Later, my father found me near the buffet, his drink sloshing as he lifted it. "Family is everything, Hannah," he said, his voice lined with weariness, but still pressing authority. I held his gaze. "Family is respect, Dad. Without that, it's just a word." His shoulders sagged and he turned away without reply. The evening blurred into conversations and music, and then Brooke appeared at my side. She asked if we could step outside. On the terrace, roses climbed the stone walls, their fragrance hanging in the cool night. She spoke quickly, almost desperate. "I'm drowning in debt. The BMW is gone. Dad can't help anymore. I don't know what to do." Her eyes brimmed, searching mine for the old version of me who would gather her up and take on her burdens. I reached out, touched her arm lightly. "I can help you make a plan," I said, "but I can't fix this for you." She blinked at me, startled by the line I drew, then nodded slowly. The moment settled between us like a fragile truth. Inside, champagne flowed as glasses were lifted for toasts. I raised mine too, my reflection caught in the mirror behind the head table. The woman staring back stood straighter than she had months ago. The old pattern had fractured. I no longer existed in their shadows, nor under their expectations. The power I had once handed over so easily now rested in my own hands. For the first time in years, I felt no urgency to win approval or carry anyone else's weight. The shift was quiet, but undeniable, a reversal that belonged only to me. As the music swelled and guests filled the dance floor, I stepped back toward the terrace, the night air cool against my skin. Tomorrow would bring its own reckoning, but tonight I understood something simple. I was no longer the daughter measured in scraps. The weeks after the wedding carried ripples that spread further than I expected. Back in San Francisco, I returned to the steady rhythm of office meetings, project deadlines, and quiet evenings in my apartment. Yet calls from relatives trickled in, some through LinkedIn, others by text carrying fragments of family gossip. According to the story making its rounds, I had suffered a breakdown, moved into squalor, and even joined a cult. At first the rumors stung, but I noticed something different this time. My colleagues at the firm knew nothing of these tales. They knew only the quality of my work and the steadiness of my designs. My worth there was measured in skill and reliability, not in whispers. That difference mattered more than the rumors themselves. 10 days after the wedding, Brooke showed up unannounced at my office building. She made it as far as reception before Megan intercepted her while dropping off lunch. "She's in a meeting," Megan told her evenly, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "And she'll stay that way if you don't have an invitation." Brooke left without seeing me, and I felt a strange relief in knowing I hadn't been forced to play the role of rescuer again. Wednesday evenings became a new anchor. I joined a therapy group that gathered in a church basement, the air heavy with coffee and faint traces of old hymnals. Around the circle sat 8 strangers bound by similar wounds. One evening, Raymond, a gray-haired accountant, said something that stayed with me. "Family doesn't get a pass just because they're family. Love without respect isn't love, it's possession." The words lingered long after I left, echoing through the streets as I walked home beneath the streetlights. By summer, my apartment had transformed. Pottery lined the windowsills, each piece more refined than the last. A proper bed had replaced the futon, and framed sketches of buildings I had worked on hung along the walls. The promotion to senior project manager ended any remaining financial worry. On a bookshelf sat the plastic piggy bank, now filled with crisp $2 bills, one for every week since that Christmas morning. It stood not as a reminder of bitterness, but as a record of freedom. The first holiday season after my departure approached with a mix of dread and relief. No long drives into Portland snow. No carefully wrapped gifts that would be overlooked. No sense of being diminished by comparison. Instead, I planned a quiet gathering with friends, people who wanted to be there, not people who expected it. That Christmas morning, sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors of my apartment. Megan raised her glass at the table, her curls catching the light. To Hannah, she said warmly, "Who builds bridges better than anyone I know, both at work and in life?" My cheeks warmed, and for once I didn't deflect the praise. Around the table sat friends from my firm and from pottery class, their laughter blending with the scent of rosemary and sage from the kitchen. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A video call from Brooke. We had agreed on monthly calls as part of the boundaries I set, and I answered. Her apartment looked smaller than mine, the walls bare, her hair tied back without its usual gloss. She offered a tired smile. "Merry Christmas. Your place looks beautiful." I tilted the camera toward the shelves where my pottery stood, sunlight catching the glaze. She adjusted her screen to show our father seated in a modest living room. He looked smaller somehow, but steadier. 90 days sober," she said softly. "The meetings are helping." I nodded, unable to process everything at once. "And Mom's volunteering at the community center. She wanted to join the call, but had an emergency food drive." The conversation ended gently without tension. Moments later, a text arrived from Brooke. A photo of a clay ornament, uneven and handmade. Not pretty, but made with love. Mailing it tomorrow. Another message followed, this time from Mom. She had attached a photo of my childhood dollhouse, the one piece of my past I had truly loved. Below it sat deed transfer papers, officially making it mine. That night, after the last dishes were washed and my guests had gone, I stepped onto the balcony with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The lights of San Francisco Bay shimmered across the dark water bridges, arcing against the sky. Buildings I had helped design stood steady in the distance. My eyes drifted to the piggy bank on the mantel, no longer a symbol of what I lacked, but of what I had claimed. Justice had not arrived in one dramatic strike, but in a series of choices, small steady steps that led me away from diminishment and toward something whole. And though reconciliation with my family remained unfinished, accountability had begun to settle in their lives, reshaping what they once ignored. The year after that Christmas felt like a long exhale. My apartment slowly filled with things that reflected me. Pottery on the shelves, framed sketches from projects I'd led, and a table that held friends who chose to sit with me. It wasn't the life I had imagined growing up, but it was one I was finally building on my own terms. Brooke and I kept to our monthly calls, sometimes brief, sometimes lingering. She had taken on 2 jobs and was learning how to budget without leaning on our parents. Once she held up a clay bowl she had made in a beginner's class, uneven, but offered with pride. I placed it on my windowsill next to my own work, not because it was perfect, but because it was hers, shaped by effort instead of entitlement. My parents moved into a smaller place after selling the house. Dad stayed in his program, counting sober days 1 week at a time. Mom began volunteering regularly, her messages less about guilt and more about updates from the community center. Our conversations were careful, but they carried a tone I hadn't heard before acknowledgement, where denial used to live. At work, I found myself paired on a project with Aaron Blake, an environmental engineer whose steady nature matched the structures he designed. Coffee after meetings turned into walks along the Embarcadero, then dinners where silence felt as comfortable as conversation. 6 months later, when he asked if I wanted to build something lasting, I found myself saying yes without hesitation. That next Christmas, I hosted again. Megan brought her famous cranberry pie, Aaron carved the turkey, and laughter filled the room in a way that reminded me of how far I had traveled from that night I drove away. After dessert, I glanced at the mantel where the piggy bank still sat, filled with weeks of $2 bills. It no longer looked like a symbol of neglect. It looked like proof of what I had chosen not to accept. Stepping out onto the balcony later, the bay stretched wide under the night sky. Bridges arched across the water, their lights reflecting against the waves. I thought of the girl who once stood in a bathroom mirror, clutching cold marble for strength she wasn't sure she had. She had learned that worth isn't handed down like a car with a ribbon. It's claimed by drawing lines no one can erase. I realized then that the greatest gift wasn't reconciliation or recognition. It was knowing I had built a life that reflected who I was, not what others thought I deserved. And that lesson would carry me further than any inheritance ever could. So if you've ever been made to feel small, I hope my story reminds you that stepping away can be the first act of building something stronger. Sometimes the truest family is the one you gather along the way. Thank you for listening. Share where you're from in the comments, I'd love to know. And if this story touched you, stay with me for more. We'll keep building these bridges together.